Hey guys, what's going on? We got another Enhancement Shaman Mythic Plus video. We are doing a 14 Rookery. Now, this was done with one of my guildmates who was his key, and it actually went really well, and we timed it, so or I wouldn't have it here, I guess, obviously, but anyways, I want to talk about something for Enhancement specifically, and we've seen a lot of buffs come out, specifically to Stormbringer, and which has been great. But there are still some spells that we have not seen any use throughout any season since the talent trees came back in Dragonflight. And that kind of seems like an issue to me. And one of those is going to be Fire Nova. Fire Nova is obviously, a different type of spell, but as of late it's become more and more useless in a sense. Now, the only time it was used was season 2 of Dragonflight for Brackenhide Hollow specifically, but that was only for a niche damage increase. It was very minor compared to Hailstorm. And to be fair, like we haven't really seen much changes. And I think the main issue is because one, its bonus talent, Swirling Elements or Swirling Maelstrom, whichever one it is, basically causes Fire Nova to generate one Maelstrom per Fire Nova created, which is very good. But in a scenario like we have lately, where our Maelstrom generation is unrealistically high. Like it's honestly ridiculous how much Maelstrom we generate. And for the Stormbringer build, that is actually what we're looking for is high Maelstrom generation, which can be useful. But for Totemic, it's honestly pointless because Totemic, you're more focused around lava lashing than spending your Maelstrom. You generate so much Maelstrom that you're ending up holding it more than you're using it, which is kind of sad to see. But, it's a different playstyle, so it does change and things happen. But yeah, so I'd really like to see Blizzard make some changes and buffs to maybe Fire Nova, bring it back because I think it would work really well with the Stormbringer build at the moment. But there's just so many talents that far surpass Fire Nova that it's just not worth it at the moment, which sucks to see because I feel like Fire Nova is kind of a staple. One of the changes I think they could do would be to remove its target cap. It's currently capped at 6 targets per Nova, which technically it's double capped because you can only have 6 flame shocks out at once, which means you can only have 6 Novas, which means you can only hit 36 targets. Now that sounds like a lot, but technically you can only hit the 6 targets with flame shock on them. You're technically hard capped 6 targets with fire. I know it sounds weird, but it is true. And when I was doing some testing with the abilities for Fire Nova with your Frost Witch and your Feral Spirits active, it still did less damage than Hailstorm with Ice Strike and Frost Witch buff, which is just not realistic because you can spam Hailstorm all you want as long as you have the Maelstrom to spend. Now, I do know that Fire Nova is more or less considered a generator at the moment due to Swirling Maelstrom, but I don't think that should be the case. I really do think they need to take a look at it, maybe change it or something, but you know, I would really like to see Fire Nova come back for at least one season. I just want to play it for one season, see how it feels, or at least make it somewhat competitive, because it's just sad to see it so pathetically low. Like, it should be like the ability for Cinderbrew Meadery. Like that should be your go-to ability because it should do like massive amounts of AoE damage. Now in classic Season of Discovery right now, Fire Nova is a totem where you drop it and it does like a cool AoE. They could return it back to its roots. And then in Wrath of the Lich King, it became more of what it is right now, where each Fire Nova or each Flame Shock generates a Fire Nova, which is very powerful. But the ones in Wrath of the Lich King was uncapped. I think it was Wrath of the Lich King or it was Cataclysm. I don't remember. I think it was Wrath, but it was uncapped AoE, which is good. But it was capped to an extent of how many targets you have Fire Nova or Flame Shocked. So Now that we have a hard cap of 6 targets, it can potentially have, like why not just uncap it? I don't know, but I do know Fire Nova can get out of hand pretty easily. But they did change it from straight fire damage to flame strike damage in season 2 of Dragonflight, which was a good change, but it still didn't bring it high enough to be relevant. And then the other one is going to be Alpha Wolf. Now, Alpha Wolf is a final tier talent for the Feral Spirits. Some of you might probably already know about it, but haven't really played it. What it does is after you Crash Lightning or Chain Lightning, your Feral Spirits that are active will pulse physical damage, which I think is good. It's a cool ability and it can do some serious damage. But as of late, it's just outscaled by anything. Like you would rather take Elemental Spirits over Alpha Wolf at the moment, but right now we're not even taking Elemental Spirits or Alpha Wolf. We're just using regular Feral Spirits because of Primordial Storm and stuff like that. So it would be nice to see it get maybe a buff or a change to maybe whenever you Feral Spirits, you and your Feral Spirits pulsate damage rather than relying on Chain Lightning or Crash Lightning, and then you add in an extra target. Now, if you're playing Stormbringer, you get extra Wolf, so that does mean you have extra Feral Spirits active to make Alpha Wolf even more powerful. But the other one could be is to separate Elemental Spirits and Alpha Wolf, maybe causing it to be a bit different. Now, that just still doesn't solve the issue, but it does add a bit more of a choice. And you could also have the Feral Spirit do sort of physical elemental damage. Like if it's a Frost Spirit, it does Frost Strike. If it's a Fire one, it does Flame Strike, and so on and so forth. But that could come into some issues, but I would like to see the talent be chosen because it was brought in Legion and it was a very powerful talent. And then it was brought back in Dragonflight when the talent trees were brought in. I don't believe it was in Shadowlands. I think that's what the expansion was called. I don't remember. I think it's Shadowlands. I don't know why I'm losing the name, but it would be nice to see some of these talents actually shine for once, because we've just been running very similar builds to what we have been in the past, and it would be nice to see a change up, because all we ever do is Storm Strike, Crash Lightning, Chain Lightning, simple Elementalist. Thank God it's changed, but now it's more of, in my opinion, Lava Lash, where you spam Lava Lash, and it's more reliant on the totem, so it is a bit different. But before, you had this Elementalist build where it was like Lava Lash, Ice Strike, Hailstorm, blah, 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 all that crap. So we have changed ever so slightly, but it seems like we've kept the same sort of thing going for each and every season since Dragonflight started, which is kind of okay, but I would like to see Fire Nova buff. I would like to see Alpha Wolf buff. I'd like to see those talents that we don't use get some use in them, like we were using we didn't really use Doom Winds all that much in Dragonflight, and now coming into the War Within, we've used it in both seasons, which is great to see because it got a change. And I think Fire Nova and Alpha Wolf deserve that change too. I don't know, but it's Blizzard's choice in the end if they want to, or at least overhaul the way it works or something. But yeah, I'd really like to see those talents come back with a change. I know Blizzard likes to keep things relatively the same, but sometimes you just need a total workaround. And then we run into some quality of life changes where I believe imbuements. I think I've brought this up many, many times, but imbuements should just be passives. We're losing out on an oil buff that all other classes get to use except for shamans because we have imbuements. What the oil buffs do is they give you either crit haste or haste mastery or some like little bit of a stat buff. It's almost like an extra enchant for your weapon. It's kind of ridiculous we don't get that option. I don't understand why we don't, but it is what it is. I really do think now you could make the argument that DKs have a similar thing where they have to use rune forging instead of enchanting, but in my opinion that's a little bit different, mainly because It's not a buff that you have to keep reapplying. You basically enchant your weapon, and they still get to use weapon oils. They just don't have to use a weapon enchant. In hindsight, it's actually better to enchant your own weapons and not have to rely on enchanters to do it for you. So I do know maybe you could make that argument with the same with imbuements. I don't know, but you can't not use imbuements. Technically, a DK could go ahead and not use their rune crafting, which I think they could. I don't know what kind of a damage difference it would be, but I don't really play DK. But yeah, I'd really like to see that change because all these classes get these weapon oils and we're stuck with using our imbuements that have been passive in the past with Legion and BFA. They were all passives. And then for whatever reason in Shadowlands, they decided, oh, we want to bring imbuements back. And I still don't really understand why, because they were passive. I don't know. But it just doesn't really seem to make sense. I don't know. I don't know. And we've had so many issues in the past, like throughout all of Dragonflight, if you started a dungeon or an arena and you did not reapply Wind Fury, even though it was already applied, the Wind Fury was not working. It actually would not take effect. And then I believe it was Shadowlands PTR or beta where you could Wind Fury both of your weapons and use Doom Winds and cause enormous amounts of busted damage. Now, that obviously was a bug and it got fixed pretty quick. But there is a similar thing with Flame Tongue that happened in Dragonflight, and I think you can still do it to this day, which is Flame Tongue both weapons and you gain the extra benefit of your elemental weapon imbuement effect from your talent tree, which increases your damage by X amount based on how many imbuements you have active. So honestly, it would solve a bunch of issues. It would solve that multi imbuing weapons of the same thing. And it would stop the issues of not having imbuements working and stuff like that. And they can control it a bit better. Like it honestly, it just ends up being a quality of life thing too, because people, honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I hate reapplying imbuements all the time when it's the same things over and over and over and over and over again. It just doesn't make sense of why I have to keep imbuing this when it could just be passive. It's not like classic where it's an RPG. We're not really playing an RPG anymore, to be honest, but it's still the same game I love. But yeah, like I don't know. I think they should make those passive, but to each their own. To each their own. Blizzard will do what they feel best, but that's just my opinion on everything. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you all watching these videos. I hope you really do enjoy them. I enjoy making them. It is fun, and I get to do my own little podcast thing, I guess. My self-explaining of things I want type of, I don't know. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoy listening to me talk. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just mute me. That's okay too. Hopefully you just enjoy the gameplay the most. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of the video as well. Laters!
I do not like that it feels darker and colder as we go down. But there are more survivors to rescue. The lift is out. If we want to keep going, we will have to go down the Storm Rider way. Follow me. What is that? What did Gorin bring here? We have to take it down.